What does it mean to be a man in Of Mice and Men? And spoilers, by the way, for John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. It's a great book. 4 out of 5 stars. You should definitely consider reading it sometime. But first, let's talk about Candy. Candy is an old disabled man who's been working on a ranch for a long time. He lost one of his hands in the ranch some years ago, but he's still allowed to work. And, well, Candy's worth as a man is only measured in his ability to work. While many of the other migrant workers in California travel from one ranch to another with dim hopes of stumbling on something different, something better, Candy stays at this ranch in particular with the knowledge that he would probably die trying to find a better job. He lovingly reminisces that his old dog used to be a great sheepdog. So, when another dog gives birth to a little puppies, they have to drown a few in the river, but they agree to give one of the pups to Candy to replace his old sheepdog who can no longer work. One of the ranch workers, Carlson, tells Candy his old sheepdog stinks and he should just put it down. Of course, Candy resists the idea out of compassion for his dear dog, who he has raised since puppyhood, but he eventually gives in and allows the other ranch worker to shoot his dog. He, of course, later regrets not having been able to do it himself, not having been able to pull that trigger so that his dog could spend his last moments with Candy, because Candy couldn't do the proper thing himself. This is one of the stories in John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. It shows a world. It shows the world of the book. This is a book about men, and they're men who have little opportunity for success, and they must work hard until the day they die. And they will die when they can no longer work. That is the day they will die. And Candy knows that he will die for the same reason they shoot his dog, because his life won't have any value to anyone richer and more powerful. I mean, why would it? He can't work anymore. So why does Candy give in? Why does he let someone else kill his beloved dog? Because in this world, in the world of mice and men, there is no room for love. Men travel almost always by themselves. They never form deep friendships or romantic relationships. And Candy knows that he cannot afford to love his dog. If he keeps his dog another mouth to feed that produces nothing, he will be cast away all the sooner. And of Mice and Men, there is only one woman who is directly depicted, at least. But she's robbed of all identity. She has no name, and she's simply referred to as Curly's wife, because this is all that the men around her see her as. Curly's wife's husband is the son of the ranch owner, and the poster child of toxic masculinity. He's short, and it's suggested he has a Napoleon complex, leading to an aggressive nature. He immediately dislikes Lenny, a much larger man who, this is explained with the line, Curly's a lot like a lot of little guys. He hates big guys. He shows no empathy or love for anyone, including his wife. Curly's wife, meanwhile, is bored and stuck in a loveless marriage, so she often roams the ranch trying to talk to the men. She complains that she can talk to the men individually, but whenever they are in a group, they become standoffish and ignore her. She shows how the man's collective attitude restricts them in a way none of them would like individually. And she says, if I catch any one man and he's alone, I get along fine with him. But just let 2 of the guys get together and you won't talk. She goes on to say, you're all scared of each other. That's what. Every one of you is scared the rest of you is going to get something on you. She originally had dreams of going off to Hollywood. A man told her when he got there he would write to her, but when the letter never came, she thought her mother had stolen it to keep her. So she went off and got married to get away, but it's not clear if she just moved from one prison to another. Curly's wife contrasts all of the men in that she is much more forthcoming and perhaps aware of her own desires. She wanted to be a movie star, Now she wants human connection. But the men in the story hide their dreams of owning land and emotional connections. Our two protagonists, Lenny and George, lie about their friendship, saying that they are cousins because just being friends wasn't acceptable. And they hide their dreams of buying their own farm, even though such dreams are common among the migrant workers. This distancing between men and their dreams is also seen in their relationship to Western magazines. And I quote, "Ranchmen love to read and scoff at, and secretly believe." The men are incapable of living with dreams, and incapable of admitting to dreaming, despite the open secret that they all have dreams. Of course, Curly's wife, like all the other characters, is incapable of directly changing the circumstance of her life. But she is not powerless over the other characters. She can influence her husband and many of the other men in the world, and she's not afraid to use the threat of this power. In one scene, she enters the shed of Crooks, the only black character, where he's speaking with Lenny and Candy. She is not welcome because of the threat of her husband's violence, so Crooks asks her to leave, but she refuses. After she insults them, Candy gets angry and tells her that she has no real power, and that the worst that she could do would be to get them fired, and they could just get new jobs. But Curly's wife knows this isn't true. She has power over Crooks, the black character, and says, "I could get you strung up on a tree so easy, it ain't even funny." And of Mice and Men, none of the characters have direct power over their own life. But the sum of all of the influence builds into something ugly. All of the men maintain a diminutive and dismissive view, leading to a profound boredom and loneliness within Curly's wife. And although they talk and work with Crooks, all of the men maintain racist worldviews that cause Crooks' alienation from his fellow workers and create a society where his life hangs on the word of a single woman. All the men maintain a brutalistic worldview that forces Candy to let him kill his dog. Our two protagonists, Lenny and George, have the hardest story to make sense of and interpret, I think. Lenny is a strong man who I want to describe as having an intellectual disability, but he doesn't. There is no disability that fits Lenny. I don't think contemporary terminology can really fit his description, because he was a character written without any real understanding of intellectual disabilities. George lies about his condition, saying he, quote, got kicked in the head by a horse when he was a kid to try to explain Lenny's condition. And when Lenny later says that he was never kicked in the head, George replies, quote, "Be a goddamn good thing if you was," end quote, suggesting that having some concrete explanation of Lenny's condition would be better than just having to accept Lenny as he was. He's depicted as a giant man of great strength with a good work ethic, and Lenny is with two other workers. But what he has in strength, he lacks in intelligence. He's depicted as childlike, innocent, happy, grateful. He struggles with self-control or remembering things. George is comparatively smart, but not particularly distinctive. The two of them together dream of buying land and reaping the fruit of their labor, and freeing themselves from the perpetual toil of working for someone else's profit. They want to own the means of their own production. Their friendship is not understood by other men, and it's a challenge to the concept of manhood that many of the characters have. But between the two of them, they hold on to their dream, no matter how unlikely. When Candy learns of their dream of saving up some money to buy land, he tells them he has a few $100s he could give them so he could live on the land too and spend his final years doing what work he was capable of. And this is when the dream starts to feel more like a plan and less of a dream. Lenny's childlike ignorance of social dynamics around him and the racist attitude of his world lead him to befriending crooks who would also like to work with them, or at least expresses some desire to work with them. Although Lenny is childlike and his main motivation for wanting to own land is so that he can maintain cute bunnies because he's obsessed with soft things, Lenny is ultimately the driving force behind this dream of proletarian solidarity, in which four men, irrespective of their race, age, or disability, own land together and prosper from the fruit of their labor. This childlike innocence is also their own undoing. Lenny doesn't know that he should be afraid of Curly's wife, and the only man who stands up to Curly in the entire book. Throughout the story, Lenny is constantly killing cute things by accident, and while touching the hair of Curly's wife, she tells him to stop touching it because he's messing it up. He loses control, and he kills her. And I'm not quite sure how to understand this stuff. It's not depicted as a murder. Lenny's meant to be innocent throughout. It's not the fault of Curly's wife either. It's shown as some kind of tragedy without a perpetrator. Curly's wife thought that they told Lenny to stay away from her for his safety, but didn't see that it could have been for hers as well. Ultimately, George must kill Lenny to save him from an even worse death or punishment at the hands of Curly. When Lenny is dead, the dream dies too. George has no hope of owning land. Of Mice and Men shows a world of fear, a world where we are powerless to change our circumstances and too bigoted and egotistical to help change someone else's circumstances. A world where men must be distant to avoid pain. In the final line, when George and Candy are saddened by having to kill their friend, another man says, quote, "Now what the hell you suppose is eating them two guys?" The good news is that we can choose not to live in this world, but to treat others with compassion and understanding and fight for our fellow human beings. Of Mice and Men depicts a way of being, but not the way things must be. I said 4 out of 5 stars, and I have to admit, I feel kinda silly giving a classic of American literature a star rating, but I know that my relationship to classic books has changed. I didn't connect to this work when I was a teenager, and I want to have something to look back onto, to understand my previous perception of the book. For a classic, I'm giving 4 stars to any book that's a great book, but also a good book. It's a good book in the sense that I enjoyed it, and it's a great book in the sense that it's an important part of American literature. I wouldn't say that you have to read it unless you want to be familiar with the great works of American literature. It's not that difficult to read. It's short. It's written relatively simply, albeit in old language, has some slang, a lot of like hobo slang. So if you want to get back into classic literature, it's a great place to start. But it's a great book in the sense that it's deep. There's a lot to read into it. Although it's short, there's a lot to connect to, and what you connect to will change across your life, and depending on who you are and your prior experiences and all of that, which I always find really interesting. And what I connected to in this particular moment of my life was this very kind of gendered reading of this book. It's about what it means to be a man. I think it connects to a certain dissatisfaction that I see among a lot of men today about how we are treated and perceived. Many men feel lonely and devalued, and if you are a man and you feel a connection with this book and my particular way of reading it, one of the things I'd like you to appreciate is that this book engages with these issues, but doesn't present them in opposition to feminism. I found that very important to me. As many men do today, they present these issues only in opposition to feminism. They often only bring up problems that men experience in opposition to problems that women experience. And this is a very simplistic, conflict-driven way of viewing things that I don't think is particularly helpful. I have like two main issues with this really. The first is that it decreases the seriousness with which people take these issues. If someone only, for example, if someone only complains that there is no Irish History Month during Black History Month, it feels more like that person cares more about the existence of Black History Month than they do about the absence of Irish History Month. And in case you're wondering, it's March. That's Irish History Month. It's just in March, in case you're wondering. If you ever want to celebrate Irish History Month, that's an important issue to you. The second problem is that these problems that men experience are not caused by feminism. Only men being drafted, for example, male loneliness, male suicide rates, and male underachievement in academic settings, and many of the other, kind of things that, some men will complain about is like men's issues, aren't really caused by feminism. But I think many men feel that these things are. That these things used to be different for men. So please read the book and see that in the Dust Bowl in like the 1930s, things were not better for men, and I would argue they were really a lot worse for most men. I think many men also, they feel attacked by feminism, which is kind of where a lot of this comes from. They hear, for example, the word patriarchy, and they think they are being blamed for the injustices of the world. And the patriarchy is like what the man used to be in the 60s. I think that's how they think of it. You see, the man said you had to go out and you had to murder and kill people, possibly die in Vietnam. The man said you couldn't be gay. The man said you had to go to church and you couldn't have sex before marriage. The man said you had to start a family. The man said that black people couldn't have the same rights as white people. And now things have changed, obviously. The man has changed. Sometimes the man is gay, sometimes he's black, sometimes he's even a gay black man, sometimes the man is a woman. And that doesn't really make your life better. If you're listening to this and you have these problems. And when women say that they've got it bad, but things have gotten so much better for them, I think some men wonder where their social movement is, where it is for the guys like them. Their grandpa or their great-grandpa had a great union job with a pension, and they're struggling just to find a gig. Things haven't gotten better for them, or at least they don't perceive that improvement. They closed the mine, they moved the factory to some other country, and Walmart drove their great-uncle's business out of town. So what's there for them? All they've got is their labor, like the men in Of Mice and Men, but unlike in Of Mice and Men, nobody wants their labor. And they're a man. They should be able to be a provider. So what the hell is wrong with society when they can't live a decent life like their grandpa? And I think these might be good questions, but the answer to these questions isn't feminism. Feminism is not the cause of these problems. Of Mice and Men shows it all. It shows dehumanization, sexism, racism, ableism, terrible living conditions, classism. But there isn't the man in Of Mice and Men. There's a boss who briefly appears, but the real kind of limitations of the characters on their freedom is caused by this interlocking web of prejudice that dictates the behaviors and values of every character. None of them alone is enough to break this web, but they all enforce it, with the exception of Lenny, whose lack of understanding of the world is so profound that he messed things up so badly they had to kill him. Or at least they treated his death as not necessary. They couldn't come up with another solution. There just wasn't one in society for him. And I think the truth is this is what it was like in the 1960s, too. There wasn't the man, not really. The housewife thought that young men should go fight the commies in Vietnam. The confirmed bachelor across the street thought women could only be stay-at-home mothers. And the young man about to die in Vietnam thought that gay people deserved to be tortured in hell. And I think when it comes to things like patriarchy, there are many words and concepts that can be interpreted in a variety of ways. I find the most useful manifestation of the word patriarchy is not when it's used like the man, but rather when it's used to describe not really a system where a man is in charge, but an attitude about traditional gender roles, which can be adopted by both men and women, and which harm both men and women. Now, many men also feel attacked by the rhetoric of feminism. Saying things like, weren't they all saying that they would rather be with a bear than a man just last year? I'm going to be dating this video if you're watching this. Like 2 years from now, 5 years, you're going to be like, what? Feminists said that they'd rather be with the bears. It's probably going to sound really funny, but if you remember, it was a thing where, people talked about how they're given the choice between finding a man and a bear in the forest, they would choose the bear because they at least knew where they stood with the bear. But, the man, maybe he would be good, or maybe he'd, want to harm them, that they just couldn't trust the man. And I get it. It's a really sucky feeling to walk down the street and see that another person is afraid of you. Think, wow, really, this person would really prefer a bear over me. It was kind of awful. And it's awful because you're you. You know that you're a good person. At the very least, you have this belief. But I think we need to talk about a couple of things here. One is the environment. Women don't feel safe walking down the street because of how they're treated by many men, and they can't distinguish you from the other men without already knowing you. And so it might not be you, but many men. I think, we have to understand this. One of the things I always think about is because I've always had long hair since I was a young child. And before I hit puberty, everyone thought I was a girl. And I remember one time I was walking down the street with a friend of my family, a girl who was maybe 17. So I was 11, she was 17. She was a close family friend. And there was a group of young men yelling sexual remarks at us from behind. I don't even remember what they said. They didn't know us. They didn't see our face. All they really needed to feel comfortable, yelling these things at us, catcalling us, was to perceive us as young women. And honestly, it was a terrifying experience. Imagine going through that as just a young child. Of course it's terrifying. And I've seen this happen, I've seen this happen often to many of my female friends, where they'll say, that this happened to them, that they were catcalled, that they feel safer walking down the street with a man or in a group. And I understand that. I think that's a very valid experience. That's a very valid feeling. It makes a lot of sense when you really kind of consider everything. And I don't think we can really expect women to not be afraid when I think we would be afraid, men would be afraid in their position too. The same thing if men were doing the same thing to us. And really, I think many men often treat women the way they wish women would treat them, but now how they wish other men would treat them. If a man catcalls another man, he's kind of risking getting into a fight, right? So I think we can conclude this isn't really an acceptable behavior. If there is a pretty high chance that another man might get really offended if you say the same thing, it's not something you should be saying to women. I think that's a pretty basic thing, and I think that's a thing a lot of men don't understand, because there's this level where a certain percentage of men will catcall and a certain percentage won't. But I think there's a lot of men in the middle who don't do it, but don't really understand the problem, or really kind of they really kind of diminish that feeling, that experience. I think that's really harmful. And so another thing I think we really should consider with this whole, feminists say terrible things about men, that you don't like the rhetoric of certain feminists, is that although you might not like their rhetoric, you might not like what they say when they're talking about men in general, feminists aren't your enemies. When it comes to the issues a lot of men talk about, when it comes to, receiving negative outcomes in child custody disputes, or divorce cases, or only men being drafted, these were a lot of the very same issues anti-feminists used to argue against the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA. And now, if you believe you're an anti-feminist, but you do believe in equality between men and women, and you don't know about the ERA, about the Equal Rights Amendment, go read the actual text of the Equal Rights Amendment. Like, just look it up, read it through, form an opinion, and look at who supports it, who supported it, and who doesn't support it, and who didn't support it, and go tell me again about who your allies are and how women are against you or how feminists are against you. It's not the case. And I think Of Mice and Men does a wonderful job of showing the problems with what it's like to be a man and how it relates to other issues. At its core, the characters are poor. They're poor men with poor men's issues, but we see how the characters' problems are made more complicated and worse by age, disability, and race. And I've been thinking a lot about that scene. I mentioned it earlier, where Curly's wife threatens to pretend she was raped by the only black character. And I think this touches upon a subject that is very relevant to the current kind of political discourse around these issues, about whether we should believe women or victims when they accuse men or other perpetrators of sexual assault, or if we should wait for proof, or what kind of proof we should wait for. And these things get very hotly debated. And I don't think this book answers that question in a profound way, but I do think there's something we can get out of it. Out of this scene in particular is that we should examine the kinds of stories we're likely to believe. We all hear these stories of like women being attacked alone on the street, and I think this is why women, feel uncomfortable walking alone at night. It's part of why they might choose the bear over the man. But like, we know someone is more likely to be assaulted by someone they already know than a stranger. That's just a fact. But it doesn't really fit into our narrative about who's willing to do the attacking. And I think it's because, in large part, the narrative that it's a stranger who's going to attack you is more comforting, and it protects the people who do the attacking. So a lot of times we don't have to think so hard about these issues. We don't have to we think our biases of like, oh, that kind of a person, maybe it's like a priest, maybe it's a woman, maybe it's a teacher, they couldn't, assault someone, or their boyfriend, their husband, the husband can't assault their wife, you hear that kind of a thing a lot. And we can kind of avoid this by thinking, oh, well, it wasn't a stranger, and the strangers are the people who really do this attacking, so there's no proof, and it wasn't like a stranger, this is who we're going to believe in. It's just a way of avoiding thinking about it. And in this book, the characters obviously believe a black man is more capable of rape than a white man, but also I think it is that it's a stranger. Like, imagine if you'd accused Curly of rape. Would anything have happened? We carry these stories about who is capable of what crime, and this hurts both men and women, and everyone, really. So I didn't like this book that much as like a young teenager, but I really like it now. I know we all get different things out of a great book, so if you're watching this still and you got something completely different out of this book, please leave a comment, let me know. I'm looking forward to picking this book up again in like 20 years and watching this video to see how my opinion has changed. And if there are any other great books in the English language, please let me know. Leave a comment. I'll see if I can read them. But there's kind of one more thing I'd like to discuss about this book. It's language. Since I've started reading books in other languages, actually, I made another video about this recently. And in another language, I have to look up many words. So I've kind of gotten used to doing this, and I've started doing the same thing in English. So sometimes the word is completely new, sometimes I kind of feel like I know the word, but not really, and sometimes it's a word I do know, but is being used in a new sense. And so a lot of times I just kind of ignore those words unless it seems really important, but I've really kind of enjoyed learning them, maybe going through the etymology, making a note. I think it's a great thing to kind of love and appreciate about a new book, and it can kind of, if you look over the list of words, it can kind of tell you something about that book. And I think language is really important. It does so much work in this book because it's based in 1930s California, and you can really see this with kind of the class and the character and location with the dialogue where everything's written out phonetically and in a different accent. So you might see words like almighty spelled with a W instead of an L, or all right, or purdy instead of pretty, which I don't know. I never really thought about that. It was just an old pronunciation that doesn't really exist anymore, but like makes me think of Looney Tunes. And this book is so influential. I'm sure it's not the first book to use this trope, to use the pairing of a large stupid character with a small smart one. But I have to imagine it's the reason why growing up I saw this all the time. Like in this old video game I used to play, Jack and Dexter was right here.
Hey, Gordy, I think we got visitors.
You think, Willard? Howdy, strangers. Passing through? Us too. Well, we gotta be moving on. Nothing to see here.
I thought you said this was a priceless gem worth...
Willard!
And the old outdated language in that was a huge part of this experience, of the experience of reading a book that reminded me of a time I'd never lived through and only knew through references and history. Really, it's like watching one of those old silent Méliès films. I don't know if you've had this experience. But it's just this moment like, oh wow, this is so old, but so influential. It's completely new, but it feels like it's been there your entire life from your childhood. Just these little references. So it feels like it's this kind of new thing springing forth almost like from your dreams, but you already know it even though it's completely new. So I'd just like to talk about some of the words I really liked and looked up. So there's slew. So this is, I didn't really understand this one, I'm going to be honest. So it means, like, when a snake sheds its skin to discard it. So it could be used to mean discard. So someone talking about who he was going to be slewed. So maybe it meant he was discarded. It could also, one of the explanations I saw online was it meant he was going to be skinned, like a potato. Like more than one way to skin a cat, like to mean to kill. I thought that was interesting. Another kind of old phrase I hadn't heard before was got the eye. So someone had the eye, was Curly's wife had the eye, and they used this to mean kind of like a wandering eye. Like she was looking at people kind of, some kind of desire or lust. I thought that was really interesting because I've heard this wandering eye, but I've never heard anyone say, oh, like, that woman has got the eye, or she gave me the eye, or that kind of a thing. Another fun one was, I ain't got the poop no more. And so someone saying, like, he couldn't do things anymore. It was Candy, who was, too old to do things. And I think this is related to the expression we still have, where it's like, I'm pooped, meaning I don't have any more energy. So he's saying, like, he doesn't have the energy, the guile to do anything. Another cool one, flop. So this means, like, an act of sex. And I think this is related to Flophouse, which is like a house where like hobos used to stay. There's a euphemism to refer to like a brothel, and then they kind of cut off Flop. I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but it does seem to mean like a night stay with like a sexual implication. There's also Goo Goo, which is a silly young man. And it seems to come from good government men, so it might be also like a good boy, like a guy who like follows the rules a little too much. It was a little unclear. There's Lulu, which is also fun to say, which is an attractive woman. There's Gingham, I think it's Gingham, and this is a cotton material that makes like a very specific pattern, which is one of those things where like I've seen this in cartoons all the time, but also like I don't actually have it. I didn't have a word for it. It just felt like one of those moments that this is coming to me from my own subconscious. There's snooker. This is a billiards game. This was one I really liked. Pants rabbits, which is any kind of parasite, especially like a genital parasite. This was used in conjunction with greybacks, which meant lice. There's Euchre, which is a card game played with 4 players and a reduced deck. I guess it went out of fashion. Maybe it wasn't even in fashion. Maybe it was an obscure card game at the time the book was in. That would be pretty funny. There was also the phrase, he flounced the cards. And so I always think of flouncing as just like a thing you do and it doesn't have an object. It's an intransitive verb. So like, oh, he flounced. But I've never heard of like, oh, like in a transitive sense that you can flounce something, like he flounced the cards. And so I think it just meant like he moved them around a lot in kind of like an exaggerated fashion. There's Jerklin Skinner, which is really important, like in the actual book. Sorry, it's jerkline, I think. I don't know if it's pronounced jerkline or jerkline at the time, but it's someone who drives mule. So the jerkline refers to the line that connects the lead mule and the driver. And I don't know why they were called Skinner. There's also periscope, which was used as a verb. I only knew like the noun a periscope, but they talk about like the snake's head periscoping. It's like, oh wow, maybe this is a word that's like much older than actual like periscopes. I never really thought about this. There's mullify. It's a great word. It sounds nice. I've heard it a million times. I saw this and I didn't know what it meant, so I had to look it up. And it's like, it means to ease a burden. So you probably already knew this one, just like was missing from my full vocabulary. There's another kind of common one, muddled. It's colored in patches and spots. It seems to be used a lot with snakes. Like when I looked it up, it was referenced to, there were a lot of references to snakes. Finally, there's recumbent, which I'd heard of a recumbent bicycle, but I'd never really thought about the word recumbent by itself. It means kind of like laying down. There's heron, which is this kind of a bird, which I thought was really cool. It's a word I've heard a lot, but I'd never really taken the time to explore. And I'm going to leave a link down in the comments to a place that has a lot of explanations of like the slang. So it's a really cool thing to go into if you're really interested in old-timey slang. And if you're still watching, you probably really liked my content in this video, or you would have clicked off long ago. And you'd probably be interested in hearing my thoughts on the poem First They Came, and it's relevant to the current situation with US politics. But don't forget to drop a like before you go. Thank you and have a good day.